I was recently perusing the internet for gaming news because that's something I normally do a couple of times each day, just to see if anything new or exciting pops up. As I scrolled through, I saw an advertisement about a new event in Pokemon Go. I played the game when it was released a few years ago, but I'll admit I haven't paid it a lot of attention in the past couple of years. As I started reading about the event, I realized that the developers have actually been putting out a considerable amount of content since I last played. Sure, at the core, it's still the same game, but they've added new generations, hundreds of Pokemon, lots of events, and plenty of content to keep fans coming back. Then I realized that I meant to look up Niantic nearly 4 years ago when I first booted up Pokemon Go on my phone. I've been curious for a while how a studio that I'd never heard of came to be in charge of developing a game for the most popular franchise on the planet. A lot of what I found was interesting, and in many ways, Niantic provides a decent look into the possibilities that augmented reality might offer in the future. So, here it is, a history of Niantic and how the studio was able to put itself in a position to create a game that's generating nearly $1 billion every single year. I'll begin by explaining a little bit about what augmented reality, or AR, actually is. Unlike VR, AR isn't a completely immersive experience that requires you to use a headset device or any sort of apparatus that attempts to remove you from the physical world. Instead, AR is all about adding things to a live view. Typically, AR relies on a live camera, the most common form being a smartphone. Snapchat filters are a great example. If you've ever seen people with puppy dog ears or flowers overlaid on their face in social media pictures, that's AR. The simplest way to explain it is that virtual reality replaces your vision entirely, while augmented reality simply adds things to what you are already seeing. AR has become much more commonplace in the last decade, but the creator of Niantic saw its potential for gaming experiences much earlier than his peers. Niantic Labs was started in 2010 by a man named John Hanke, but before delving into that, it's important to examine his earlier years that provided him the knowledge he needed to bring AR and gaming together. In his earlier years, Hanke created a startup company called Keyhold that Google bought in 2004. He was then tasked with working on an Earth Viewer project for Google that eventually became Google Earth. He worked on Google Earth and Google Maps for the next 6 years. Hanke says that the group he was working with in 2004 only had a few dozen people on it, but by 2010 it had grown to over 1,000 engineers and project managers, and another couple thousand contractors who were all working on Google Maps. Some of you watching this video probably remember a time before Google Maps existed and how the app has changed over the years. We didn't always have GPS in our pockets. Truck drivers actually had to use maps, and taxi drivers had to rely on their own knowledge of the city to get from point A to point B. As we all know, that's no longer the case. Finding your way to your destination these days is often as simple as punching in the address on your smartphone, and then you're good to go. Hanke understands the technology that made that transition possible better than the majority of people alive today, because he was hard at work creating it for Google from 2004 to 2010. By that time, though, Hanke was ready to do something more entrepreneurial. He'd worked on several startups before he went over to Google, and he'd literally helped build a map of the world. So he decided that he wanted to use his abilities to create something in a field he was passionate about. Gaming. He grew up playing video games, and he knew that people enjoyed the social aspect of gaming, so his vision was to use the technology he was familiar with on mobile phones to do something more exciting. With a few of his colleagues, he asked permission from his bosses at Google to work on a new project that would bring that vision to life. The first thing they worked on was called Field Trip, a software that allowed people to find historical sites and cultural artifacts by using their phone. Niantic announced on July 12th last year that the app was no longer available for download and they were finally shutting down services, but it was still frequently used up until that point. It's unfortunate that I was never able to try it out because it really does look super cool. It's a virtual tour guide that sounds like a great way to find interesting things around the city. Around the same time that Field Trip was launching back in 2012, Hanke and the rest of the team began working on a game called Ingress. Just like the other projects he had worked on, Ingress used GPS technology to do something cool and new. It allows you to locate and interact with portals that are scattered throughout the world around you. It's kind of hard to describe what makes Ingress so cool, so I'll just let you look at this bit from the game's YouTube channel a few years ago.
Ingress is
a giant game of the capture the flag,
where you play a video game but in real life.
Ingress is like Foursquare meets geocaching meets
giant game of Risk, where the board is like the surface of the earth.
There's nothing really like it out there.
You actually have to go out into the real world to play the game.
Ingress is not a game.
The line between reality and a game and the story get blurred.
This is the kind of thing that everybody's always wanted to do, like you bring video games into real life.
As you can see, Hanke was ahead of the curve when it comes to AR innovation and bringing that technology into the gaming space. Ingress was all about exploring the real world and looking for portals that could be statues, murals, art, buildings, or any other point of interest. Your goal, as the player, is to capture all of the portals for your team. There were two factions in Ingress that always competed to claim as many portals as possible by deploying their resonators. After 8 resonators have been deployed on a portal, it is fully claimed, but you have to hack portals to get the resonators you need. So imagine you're trying to capture a portal owned by the enemy faction. Then you have to use items like XMP bursters to attack that portal and weaken it. In short, you walk around and hack portals to get the items you need to claim that portal for your team. It's a real-world version of Capture the Flag that encompasses landmarks around the entire world. You can also link 3 portals together to create a control field, meaning that you were in total control of that area. Considering that Ingress was released in December of 2013, it's a very impressive project that was the first to harness the power of AR technology in a way that created a game. Ingress, no doubt, was the precursor to Pokemon Go. According to Hanke, Google refuses to back projects that are copies of something else, so he always went into his work with the mindset that he had to do something new, and his philosophy eventually became to create games that made you go outside and move around in order to play. Games that forced you to go and visit new places. If you think back to some of the media attention that Pokemon Go received upon release, this will all sound very familiar. The game was praised because it got kids out of the house, and there were numerous reports that Pokemon Go was helping people lead healthier lifestyles. On the contrary, some people said it was dangerous because people didn't look where they were walking or driving, and they were too immersed in the AR aspects of the game to realize what was happening in the physical world around them. Ingress laid the foundation for that process, and it's an interesting look at how Pokemon Go came to be. After Ingress launched in 2012, it received a cult-like following. It only had about 15 million downloads, but there was a sizable audience that wanted more of what it offered: exploration, discovery, exercise, and socializing. Hanke was trying to figure out how to introduce that formula to a bigger audience throughout 2013, but he couldn't decide on a viable IP that could become a reality. He says that all changed on April Fool's Day of 2014, when the Google Maps team did a mashup with Pokemon as an April Fool's joke. The video received 18 million views, and it made him realize that an AR Pokemon experience could be exactly what he'd been looking for. At that point, he reached out to the Pokemon company and said, "The joke did really well. Let's build a real game around that concept." And, as luck would have it, the CEO of the Pokemon company was already a level 11 Ingress player the first time that Hanke met him. He had been playing every day and was fascinated by Hanke's idea. Hanke later said that he's given lots of pitches for different kinds of partnerships over the years, but the Pokemon meeting was the only one that from the very first meeting, both parties knew they had to join forces. The two sides cut a deal shortly afterwards. Using the lessons he had learned from Ingress, Hanke and his team went into development of Pokemon Go, seeking to create a version 2 of their previous work. They decided to completely rebuild the infrastructure of their game. In hindsight, it was a smart move, because the size of Pokemon Go would have obliterated the technology they used for Ingress. Niantic was able to use the crowdsourced data from Ingress to populate the locations for Pokestops and gyms within Pokemon Go. They used data from Google Maps to spawn specific Pokemon on certain terrain, and the map display from OpenStreetMap to add the finishing touches. By 2016, hype for Pokemon Go was quickly growing. At Comic-Con in 2016, Hanke revealed the game would have 3 factions: Team Valor, Team Mystic, and Team Instinct. Fans quickly jumped on board in picking the side they would represent in their attempts to catch them all in augmented reality. The idea to introduce factions is certainly drawn from the success they had with encouraging players to pick a team in Ingress. I'd like to take a moment here to let the reality soak in that Pokemon Go is literally Ingress version 2. Instead of capture the flag, it's capture the Pokemon. Instead of portals, you visit Pokemon gyms. Beneath the surface, Ingress and Pokemon Go are the same game, something that very few people realize. Hanke also promised continuing support for Pokemon for years to come, and Niantic has held firm to that promise. At the time of release, he said the game only included 10% of the ideas that the team wanted to implement. Since then, they've added Pokestops, gyms, hundreds of new species of Pokemon, different regions from newer generations, berries, improved encounter mechanics, more clothing for your avatar, a weather system, and tons of seasonal events to keep things interesting. Another thing to consider is that Pokemon Let's Go Pikachu and Let's Go Eevee are both directly inspired by Hanke's work. The way you catch Pokemon using the Joy-Cons in those games was a huge step away from traditional Pokemon games, and it only happened because of the success that Niantic experienced on mobile phones. There's even integration between the two games that allows you to connect them and transfer your pocket monsters from your phone to your Nintendo Switch. To put it simply, the Let's Go games are just Pokemon Go without the augmented reality. The impact of Hanke's work can't be overstated. Pokemon Go has grossed $950 million in 2016, $890 million in 2017, and has continued to hold strong ever since. It's easily surpassed the $4 billion mark and made $1.4 billion in 2019 alone. It's currently the 6th highest grossing mobile game in history, and it isn't showing any signs of slowing down. Of the top 40 most profitable mobile games of all time, it's the only one that falls into the augmented reality genre. What Hanke has accomplished is incredible, and his work with AR has changed the landscape of gaming forever. A guy who started out working on Google Maps was able to use that same technology and his passion for gaming to create some of the most innovative AR game experiences in the history of the industry. As augmented reality continues to grow, we shouldn't forget John Hanke and his contributions to our favorite pastime. Well, I hope you enjoyed this look at Hanke's career and how he was able to turn Niantic into the world's most impressive AR game development studio. If you did, be sure to share it. We put a lot of time and hard work into each of these projects, so your help is always appreciated. Thanks for watching, and as always, I'll see you guys on the next one.